Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today when we will be discussing three key tools you can use to optimize employee experience within the workplace. We'll especially be looking at hybrid and flexible working environments, as these are what most people are transitioning to nowadays. My name is David Thomas, and I'm part of the Open Sensors team. What we do here at Open Sensors is deploy a variety of sensors throughout the workplace to gather occupancy, utilization, and environmental data to help people inform their strategic decision-making process and create the optimal workplace for them and their employees. We also provide the tools that facilitate flexible working, such as booking solutions, to ensure that the way that you want your workplace to run is how it happens. So before we dive into the main part of the session, I'd just like to draw your attention to the Q&A function or the chat function. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them over to me and I'll try and get to them as we go through. Just as a quick outline of what we're going to cover, I'm going to start off with talking through some of the key challenges that we've seen our clients dealing with over the past couple of months, and also some of the talking points which are currently prevalent in the facilities management and workplace and space management kind of sphere. And then going to look at some of the tools that can be used and introduced to mitigate these challenges. The first of which is coming from a utilization occupancy point of view, and we're going to talk through how to gather this data and what metrics to leverage in those decisions. Secondly, when we've spoken about optimizing the workplace, we're going to talk about workplace access and why booking tools are very important in ensuring a smooth employee experience. And finally, we're going to look a bit at employee well-being and communicating safety measures throughout organizations to do with indoor air quality to make sure that people feel secure and safe when accessing the workplace. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the challenges that we've been seeing crop up over the last couple of months. And like I said, these are things that we've had as direct feedback from our clients, but also things that we've seen teams responsible for the workplace raising questions about, and employees looking for assistance in kind of mitigating and solving these problems. So the first one is to do with finding and reserving space. And this has largely come about due to the shift away from traditional one-to-one working environments. Now that people have the freedom to work from home and they don't necessarily have their own assigned space within the office, the way that employees are interacting with space has changed, and the tasks that they're coming into the workplace to do have changed as well. And this means that you don't necessarily have such a permanent base within the office, so you need to be able to plan ahead and make sure that the spaces you need for the tasks that you're choosing to come in for are available and readily available for you to use as and when you need them. The second point is one that we've seen being raised more and more over the past couple of months, really. And it's kind of a layover from the lockdown period of the pandemic, where Zoom became a central part of internal structures in organizations. And now that people are coming back into the office, that's still the case. So there'll be times in the week where you'll be at home, so you'll be joining meetings remotely, you'll be in the office and you'll have in-person meetings, but there will be a blend as well. So you might be the only person in the office, but there's still a fully remote meeting. So while you have your desk that you work at, you might have to go and find a private booth. And the question then is raised, what happens to your desk while you're gone? Do you keep it? Is it released? It kind of brings with it a whole myriad of challenges. The third point is quite a high level one from an employee's perspective. It's largely to do with when you're looking at your workload for the coming week, how are you best able to actually allocate your time between the home and the office, or the office and wherever you choose to work outside of it? And how do you fit your working schedule around your own desires? And what kind of tools are there to make sure that this is going to work smoothly, can adapt to the little changes or bumps that always happens, like hiccups or like an ill child or something like that. The fourth point is kind of an organizational one, and it's again due to this change in working style that there's a far bigger emphasis when in the workplace on collaboration and group work. And it means that competition for the spaces provided is now very different. So the traditional office environment, the layout of it is going to need to change to accommodate these new working styles. And it's kind of a case of understanding exactly how your employees want to work and how they're choosing to work. And from there, you can start to think about optimization. And now we're on to the fifth point, and that's to do with the health risks posed by COVID-19. And from a personal point of view, this is quite a big one for some people. There's still a bit of hesitancy for some people in terms of protecting themselves and those around them from the risks posed by indoor environments. And from an organizational perspective, it can be a bit of a bottleneck in some return to work plans, in that people are hesitant to come back in when they're not quite sure what measures are in place or what's being done to ensure that they're safe. So we're going to look about what steps organisations can introduce to make sure that employees know that the environment that they're entering is controlled and is being looked after, essentially. So let's move on to the first way of dealing with these problems, and that is coming at it from an occupancy and utilisation perspective to ensure that the workplace itself is optimised to the needs of employees. And from a very basic point of view, this will boost employee experience by just enabling people to work the way they want. When they come into the office, you don't want to waste a journey coming in and then realise, oh, the space I want isn't actually available, there aren't enough of them, or there isn't a desk for you to sit at all day long. When you start to think about optimising the workplace or making these changes, you can't really do so until you have a really clear understanding of how space is currently being used. And even if you're kind of doing pulse surveys and asking employees, how do you want to work? How do you currently work? It's really impossible to get an accurate view of this without gathering data from your meeting rooms, your desks, your collaboration zone. Every asset you have and every kind of space you have needs to be monitored so that you know which ones are highly in demand and which ones present the opportunity for optimization. And the way we do this is by deploying a variety of different sensors throughout spaces. So we've got the meeting room counters, which can tell you how many people are in a space at any one time. So essentially, is that space being used sufficiently throughout the day? And is it being used effectively? What we don't want to see is a 10-person meeting room being consistently used all day, but only by 2 people. It's wasteful at the end of the day. And then there are footfall counters which can be used to show how well your collaboration zones or your cafeterias, shared spaces, how well they're being used. And then the final type of sensor that we use a lot throughout these workplaces, and especially during these kind of optimization projects, is the desk PIR. And these are placed on any private workstation, so individual desks or phone booths. You place these on them and then you tag them accordingly. So whether it's a sit-stand desk, whether it's a phone booth, any way you can think of to distinguish your assets from each other, you can then tag them and then gather data and compare them against each other and build up these profiles of how different spaces are being used throughout the week, how they're being used by different teams, and which ones are most highly in demand and kind of fought over and competed over, and which ones are actually just kind of taking up space and realistically should be repurposed to something more useful for the modern working style. So with these sensors, you can start to build up a real useful bank of kind of data points which are quite indicative of what's going on in the workplace. So the first one in the top left is looking at the distribution of desk usage throughout a week. And what it's showing is that these desks in this office are actually quite underused. So all of them nearly under 20% used, and the majority are used less than 10% of the day. And what's happening here is people will be coming into the workplace and they kind of need a base of operations for the day. So even if they come into the office to collaborate, go into meetings, this kind of thing, you come in, you put your stuff down at a desk, it's quite natural behavior. So it means that even if these desks aren't being used very much throughout the day, they're kind of taken out of circulation because someone's stuff is there. And you can't just really go up and shove it onto the floor. That's not how things work. So when you see data like this, when your meeting room occupancy is really high and your room occupancy and your desk occupancy is really low, you can start to make considerations like, oh, maybe if people are using these desks as a way to store their things, what we need to invest in is locker space and free up this underused desk space to be repurposed to something more meaningful. The second way of looking at these of desk utilization is similar in terms of averages versus peaks throughout the day. Because when you have a high peak, what it means is that and a high difference between your average and your peak, what it means is that you can't repurpose that space because it is in use at some point. And if you take it away, there'll be times when that means that people are left without the space that they require. So what you want to start doing is looking at where these peaks occur throughout the week. And what's happening at the moment is the midweek days are very busy and Monday and Friday tend to be quite empty. So you can start to think about potentially introducing mobility profiles and saying who can come in on what days, maybe have work rotas on departments on a weekly basis of, right, you guys can come in 3 days a week, but once every 2 weeks, you have to be on a Monday or a Friday, to start to spread this throughout the week evenly and bring these averages and peaks together so that the space that is currently only being used very rarely in the peak times is now more available to be changed and replaced with something in higher demand by employees. And in the top right-hand corner, this is the output from the counting sensors that go in meeting rooms. So when you know the array of the rooms you've got and their capacities, and then you know how many people are in them every day, what you can then do is calculate what a more appropriate array would be. Like, for example, here it says you currently have 6 rooms for 1 people, but we would suggest having 8 rooms for 1 people. So what they need is more private spaces for people to go and do individual work, which suggests that at the moment, rooms of a significantly more large capacity are being used by one person consistently throughout the day. But then the rooms for two people, they need less of them because maybe those are the rooms that are being occupied by one person. So it's a case of replacing these rooms with booths and just kind of making sure that space is being used in the most appropriate way possible. And by doing this, by ensuring that the right amount of space is being provided, it's just going to make it life easier for employees and less frustrating as well for the others who maybe can't, who see the space that they require being used incorrectly. If you have the correct array of rooms and assets, it's just going to be a more smooth experience for everyone involved. And this is where the metric in the bottom right-hand side comes in. And that's when you start to tag things by their work point type. And this is where you can compare collaboration booths against collaboration tables, sit stands, informal, formal, any which way you can think of. You can tag these, see which ones are used most, which ones have the closest peak to average, and which ones you need more of and which ones you need less of. So if the first stage in creating a smooth employee experience in the workplace is optimizing the workplace and providing the right spaces, the second step is ensuring that employees have a really quick and easy way to access these spaces and plan their working weeks in advance. And the way to do this is with a booking system. And traditionally what these do is enable you to find the space you need, searching by all the filters like I need a room of this size, I need a phone booth, I want it on this desk, I want it to be in this department with these people. All that kind of functionality needs to come as standard so that you can really dig down into or be really specific with your requirements. But what we've done at Open Census is try to take it a step further and look at where the choke points in traditional booking systems come from and what the frustrations are that build with them over time. And to get around these, we've integrated our booking system into the sensor network that we use to gather occupancy data. So what we can do is start to automate a lot of the functions that traditionally took up a lot of both end users' time and also managerial time for the people running the system. So I'll talk you through a couple of these examples of the kind of functionality that we're talking about. So having sensors integrated into the booking system means that when you arrive at your booking, you no longer need to go in and sign into your booking and check in. The sensor itself can determine whether or not you're there and then check you in automatically. And similarly, it can deal with no-shows. So if you don't turn up to your booking, after 10 minutes, the sensor will say, this person hasn't turned up, let's release the desk back into the system so someone else can use it. And this greatly reduces the amount of wasted space due to no-shows. The good thing about having these integrations is, well, the way that they enable teams to manage the bookings is far simpler. If it's all done through one tool, one of the most common things that we had complaints from with people who'd used other booking systems was dealing with cancellations or dealing with edits to the booking. So by having it built into the system itself, it takes away quite a lot of the significant time management part of it for the admin team behind the scenes. If it's all done automatically through the sensors, it means that the system runs on its own and you don't need so much of a human touch in it to make sure that it's running smoothly. And the final thing that we've done to kind of try and make sure that this is really keeping employees at the center of everything is building a system which learns from its users. So when you first sign up to the system, it'll ask you, what's your department? What are your preferences? Do you like this kind of space? Do you like this kind of space? And then as you use it more and more, it will learn what spaces you tend to occupy. And then when you log into the app, it will recommend the spaces that you've used most, the ones that fit your preferences. And if they're not available, it'll find a similar space and tell you where that is for the period of time that you're looking for. So we've tried to kind of create the system where it accommodates for human behavior, and human behavior is often you're running late. So we've made it so that you can confirm your booking and hold your booking through the confirmation emails, or you can edit them or cancel them there and then. And everything is possible through that app. So you don't have to log into your computer. You don't have to log into a separate system. You can just do it on the go from anywhere at any time. Now moving on to the third tool that we think is really important to employee experience, and that's environmental data. And this is from purely a well-being and peace of mind perspective. There's been a lot of research done throughout the COVID pandemic on what factors impact viral transmission in indoor settings. And the overarching conclusion is that it's all due to fresh air. So how regularly is the air being replaced within a space to get those COVID particulates out of the air and make sure that you're breathing in safe air. And the way to monitor this is to look at carbon dioxide levels, which typically should remain between 3 to 500 parts per million. If they creep up above that, what it means is that the fresh air is not being brought in at a sufficient rate to counteract the effect of people breathing within that space. So everyone's starting to breathe the same recycled air between each other, and that's when viruses start to be transmitted. So by gathering environmental data through these sensors, which gather CO2, temperature, and humidity levels, you can then start to see if your HVAC systems are doing enough to keep employees safe. And then you can compare these environmental metrics against the occupancy data that you're gathering at the same time and see how it's building up throughout the day, whether there's a certain day that the HVAC system needs to be kind of working harder on. And on Mondays and Fridays, if it's emptier, you can probably lower them back down so that you can be energy efficient and safe at the same time. And from a organizational point of view, when we're talking about return to work plans or trying to encourage people to come back to the workforce to collaborate, a big thing that we've seen kind of blocking this is people being a bit wary of indoor spaces, which is a very natural response given the last couple of years. So companies can introduce these measures and clearly communicate it to their employees so that they are free to make the choice for themselves. They can see what's happening in the workplace to make sure that it's safe, and they're safe in the knowledge that this data is being gathered in real time. If there is a spike in any sort of CO2 or anything, you can respond to it immediately, move people away from the space or open windows or anything until it's come back down to a safe level. So there are the systems in place that are well communicated, and hopefully this will allay any sort of employee hesitancy or doubt as to whether or not the workplace is safe. So those are the three things that we see as being central to making sure that the office and the workplace is providing a efficient and optimal working experience for employees. I just want to quickly touch on how we actually bring them together. As we work with LoRa and the IoT networks, we can bring all these sensors and these solutions into one kind of network so that everything's been gathered and channeled through the same gateways, the same data, and into the same dashboards. So that's booking, environmentals, and utilization data all coming through the same place. And what this means is that it's a very flexible system. So as and when you make changes, we can change the sensors alongside you and make sure that as you actually come do these iterative processes, the systems you have in place to support them and to monitor them change with it. And they don't touch your IT systems. It's completely separate. So it's very flexible and it's very secure. And it's all kind of three pillars of workplace experience coming through one solution, which should be able to support you as you develop and move towards that optimal workplace for your employees and your long-term business goals. I'd like to thank you all for joining. And if you do have any questions, please do drop them through to me. My email is david.a@opensensors, or you can get in touch at hello@opensensors.com. And we have a lot further resources on our website, on the resource center, to do with what we've just spoken about today. So please do go check it out if you have any questions. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good afternoon.